many Bitcoiners that have come up to you and asked for these pictures, have any of them tried or persuade you to have like a change of heart?
Oh, almost all of them. Everybody kind of wants me on the team, right? It's like, I'm like the star player that like, if we can get Peter, if we can convince Peter, like I represent like the last holdout of the old guard, because then if they turn me, then it's opening up a floodgate.
We're here with the notorious Peter Schiff at the Bitcoin conference. Not a gold conference, a Bitcoin conference. How does it feel to be here?
Well, if it was a gold conference, it would be much smaller. You'd probably fit the whole conference in this back room here. Just your, your whale tank, whatever it is bigger than most gold conferences.
That's funny. I saw the tweet that you made the first day of Industry Day when you set up your booth. And you're like, I was here in 2006. This reminds me of back in the day before everything crashed.
Well, it was the mortgage bankers. But, one of the things that, I looked at the time was how fancy their booths were, and they had a lot of entertainment. I think they even had like tigers there. But the industry had so much money in mortgage finance because of the big bubble. And right now it's the crypto industry that has all the money because of this massive bubble. They had so much money, they bought off all the politicians. So that's why you have the Trumps here, you have J.D. Vance here, because crypto was the biggest donor to, the Trump campaign. They gave more than the defense industry, than the pharmaceutical industry, the oil and gas industry. Crypto was the biggest, influence buyer. And, when you have a conference like this, they don't normally occur at market bottoms. When you have this kind of money that's been made, this kind of enthusiasm and excitement, it's more indicative that something's coming to an end. Because people are always very optimistic and very bullish at the peak. And when you get that kind of attitude, you need to really question what comes next. That's what I mentioned when I did the panel debate I did yesterday, was for people to try to assess whether or not they think they're early or late, based on, how big this is. And people can look, oh, it just means it's going to get bigger. Well, maybe not. Maybe this is, maximum size right now. Because when you're talking about Bitcoin, you're talking about basically the greater fool.
Okay.
Because Bitcoin depends on more people coming into the ecosystem and buying. Because that's how the people that are already in can get out. You have to have more people to buy what they're selling. And I know a lot of people just don't sell any Bitcoin, and that helps keep the price going. But, people do sell, and you need new buyers. And just the people that are already in, may not be enough because they've already bought it. But eventually there's always a group that gets left holding the bag, because it's not a wealth creating system, it's just a wealth transfer mechanism. Bitcoin or none of these crypto tokens represent any real wealth. I mean, they're not valuable commodities that we use. They're not income producing assets. They're not factories that produce goods. They're just digital tokens that do nothing. And just because we have a bunch of them doesn't mean we're wealthy. But what happens is some people that bought early, they get wealthy because the wealth is transferred from the people who get in late to them. And you always have the bag holders, the people that get in at the end, and their losses equal the profits of the early adopters who cashed out. And so I was suggesting that people consider where they think we are. Because if you're coming in at the end, you're just going to get left holding the bag as the market implodes.
So you think we're coming to the end of an era, a Bitcoin era, you would say?
Well, we'll see. I mean, is there going to be another leg with all these politicians and Wall Street money? Or, is this, again, evidence of a massive top when you have this kind of euphoria?
But we've had multiple tops, wouldn't you say, like peaks in bull markets?
Yeah, we've had peaks that turned out to just been temporary, and all the pullbacks have been bought, and we've made new highs. But, the progress has been slowing. Because if you look at the peak, right, in 2021, that peak, and measure the price of Bitcoin in real money, gold, right, not dollars or other currencies, But Bitcoin today, even at 107,000, wherever it is, and with gold at 3,300 and change, Bitcoin is 10% lower priced in gold now than it was in November of 2021. So, you're getting close to 4 years actually, where Bitcoin is lower, despite all the hype, despite all the Wall Street money, all the politics, all these conferences.
But wouldn't
So,
that mean that it's being more stable rather than the bubble about to burst?
well, but people aren't buying Bitcoin for stability. They're buying Bitcoin to get rich. They're buying Bitcoin because they think it's going to go to the moon. And what I'm saying is, it seems like it's running out of steam. The big money has been selling into all the hype. And we could be making a major top. And the next drop may not be a buying opportunity. We could keep dropping.
You mentioned tokens and how everybody's like, the rich, that the people that went in first will get rich, but all the Bitcoin hasn't been mined yet. So where does that fit into
Well,
the
most of it
equation?
has been mined.
Most of it,
Yeah.
but we're not going to see it. We still have until like 2140 to see the last Bitcoin. So how would that make it like a Ponzi scheme?
Well, I don't know that people are even going to care about it in 2140. It's a Ponzi or pyramid or chain letter in that Bitcoin itself does not generate any income. It's not like a piece of property that you can rent out. It's not a stock that has earnings that pays dividends. It's not a bond that pays interest. It's not a commodity that you could use like
But
gold.
was that its true intention, or wasn't it to be like a medium of exchange and just to
Well,
eliminate the
yeah, but
intermediaries?
except Bitcoin is not a very good medium of exchange.
Why?
Very few. Well, it's very slow. It's very expensive. And the more people that try to use it as a medium of exchange, the slower and more expensive it gets. So it can't scale to any degree. So that's why people just hold it, because they think it's going to go up. But why should it go up if it doesn't have any real utility other than the fact that you can hold on to it and hope it goes up?
What about the US dollars that don't really have any value and they keep printing and we still use them?
That's a problem too. That's why people should not hold dollars long run either. But the dollar is a good medium of exchange. It's very easy to buy and sell things in dollars. But you don't want to hold dollars for a long period of time because they're going to lose purchasing power. That's why you want to invest. You want to own real assets, you want to own stocks, you want to own real estate, you want to own gold. But I don't think you want to own Bitcoin for that reason. Bitcoin is more of a pure speculation.
So you say it can crash and everything, and obviously you're known as the #1 critic of Bitcoin. Do you own any Bitcoin?
Well, not really. I set up this strategic Bitcoin reserve kind of to make fun of the government's strategic reserve, because the government said, oh, we're going to have this reserve, but we're only going to get Bitcoin in a revenue neutral way. We don't want to use taxpayer money, but if we can figure out how to get some free Bitcoin, we'll do it. And so I set up my strategic reserve based on the same concept. I said, if I can get free Bitcoin, I'll take it.
Okay, and
And
how's that going?
I published my address. I've gotten some. Maybe I got about, at the current market price, maybe about $6,000 of Bitcoin. Not much. But I've committed to never sell it, like a true Bitcoiner.
Okay.
I bought one of these like Tezers or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I said, look, here's the Bitcoin. You can put it in there and you can watch it. I'm never going to touch it. You can just see what happens to my, strategic reserve. I don't really look at it as my Bitcoin because, I'm just going to leave it there as an experiment to see what happens to it.
Well, that's the best way to do it. If I give you a free Bitcoin, why wouldn't you take it? You know what I mean?
Well, look, exactly. Yeah, but I wouldn't buy it. I don't want to waste my money buying it. But if somebody gifts it to me, sure, I'll accept it.
I've been hearing around, you live in PR, and you're notorious for having like these amazing parties in Puerto Rico. And two, many have said that you're kind of like a closeted Bitcoiner. Would you say that you are?
No, I think because we're kindred spirits in a lot of the economic philosophy of free markets and Austrian economics. And that's why I mentioned when I did my panel, because when I'm here, people are constantly coming up to me wanting, a photograph with me, but they tell me that I'm the reason they own Bitcoin, because they listened to me years ago about economics, about sound money and the Fed and inflation. and I'm the one that got them into Bitcoin. I mean, maybe they started with gold, but then they went to Bitcoin or they went straight to Bitcoin. But if it wasn't for me educating them on economics, they never would have found Bitcoin. So even though it wasn't my intention that they buy Bitcoin, that was what happened. And then of course there's that group of people that just think I'm a contrarian indicator. And every time I post on X something negative about Bitcoin, they go and buy more. In fact, they actually have programs now that you can that automatically buy Bitcoin for you when I say something about it. So I got all these people into Bitcoin, and now they're all buying Bitcoin because of me. So that's why when people are like, well, why are you at this Bitcoin conference? I said, well, I'm the most relevant person here. I got more people to buy Bitcoin than anyone else.
Come on, you're a Bitcoiner, fam. You gotta admit it.
It's just like I got more people to move to Puerto Rico. I was like one of the first people there. And then the Bitcoiners followed me there.
And you were also one of the 50 to predict the crash in '08.
I didn't know there were 50. But
yeah, they told me.
I didn't know there were that many.
That's funny, but as many Bitcoiners that have come up to you and asked for these pictures, have any of them tried or persuade you to have like a change of heart?
Oh, almost all of them.
Yeah, what's their pitch that they go up to?
No, well, they're all similar, but everybody kind of wants me on the team, right? It's like I'm like the star player. That if we can get Peter, if we can convince Peter, I represent the last holdout of the old guard. Because then if they turn me, then it's opening up a floodgate, right, of the boomer generation that is resistant to this new idea, right? So it's a goal, it's aspirational. And I think a lot of the people that believe in Bitcoin, and I don't believe in it, but they believe that I'll eventually come around because they're so convinced that they're right, and they know that I'm a smart person, they just assume that I'll eventually get it. But I look at it as, they're so invested emotionally and mentally, that the cognitive dissonance and the groupthink is so strong that it never occurs to them that I'm the one that's right and that they're wrong.
Have you put in the 100 hours of Bitcoin to learn it? I just, have you read the books? I'm very curious. Be honest. Yeah, no judging here.
I knew about Bitcoin long before most people here knew about it. So I've had more than 100 hours. Look, I mean,
So what would you say the loopholes are that just don't align to, that you're like, I don't see it?
I think it's the technology and the way it works and all that stuff is very interesting and very compelling. And I think it's a sexy story if you don't really get the nuances. When I first learned about it in 2010, and it was $1 or whatever. I think I remember it being under $1 and watching it. Oh, now it's $1. But and thinking about buying it. I think if I had really known, maybe I would have thrown 10 grand or 50 grand at it back then, and maybe I'd have an extra $1 billion today. I don't know. Assuming I would have hodled it, I'm sure I would have kept some. There's no way I could have kept it all if I bought a million Bitcoin or 100,000 Bitcoin back then. I mean, I'm sure I would have. I would have had to have cast out at least some of it. But I think that the promoters that got in, like the Winklevoss and these guys, they did a hell of a job, promoting what they owned. And it's just a giant pump and dump scheme that's taken on this massive proportion and has now basically, sucked in Wall Street with all these Bitcoin treasury companies and ETFs. And now you got the governments, not only the federal government, but all these state governments that want to just buy Bitcoin. I mean, so it's massive, the scale of this, this scheme. But in the end, it's all going to collapse, and they'll write about it in the history books, right? There's a guy here that showed me, he has a Bitcoin museum. He was showing me, and I said, yeah, that's where Bitcoin is going to be relegated to, a museum. It's like a museum of financial manias, and you could put Bitcoin there as the biggest one, and people can go to the museum and learn about this digital token that we call Bitcoin, but they're not going to be using it in the future for anything.
But there's been a lot of talk of using Bitcoin with AI, because obviously with AI, AI can't create a bank account. There's all these different use cases for Bitcoin in the future. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, there's no use cases for it now. I don't know, but
No, but are you a little salty that you didn't buy back then in 2010?
No, I mean,
and
look,
that's why, Fiat, come on, my friend.
I don't know if salty is the word. I mean, look, it's not like I have a hard time sleeping at night because I didn't buy Bitcoin. I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes from things I could have bought, woulda, coulda, shoulda, I bought things that have gone up and I've, done well on certain investments. Clearly I could have done better had I just put all my chips on Bitcoin when I first learned about it. But I didn't do that. But, I got a good life. I got plenty of money. It's not like, yeah, sure, I can have more. I think a lot of the investments that I've made, I think are going to do better than Bitcoin from here, right? Even if Bitcoin goes up, I think I own a lot of things that will go up more. But I think there's a big risk that Bitcoin's going to go
more
down.
than Bitcoin?
Well, almost everything, because I think Bitcoin's going down.
But you also mentioned that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. What does intrinsic value really even mean?
Well, again, you have to separate Bitcoin from being able to be used as a medium of exchange.
But why? Isn't that the main theory of it, though? Like
no,
electronic cash system?
The origin of money. Why is gold money? Well, I mean, gold is money because it's a commodity. So it represents real value. You're wearing some gold jewelry, right? Jewelry is one use of gold, but there are a lot of other uses. It's the most useful metal that we have. It has properties that are very unique to gold and extremely valuable for all sorts of industrial applications, right? So gold has value. If you've got something that you want to sell me, I can pay for it in gold. You can give me a valuable good and I can give you something valuable in exchange, as opposed to barter. Like, in prison, cigarettes are money.
Exactly.
Why are cigarettes money? Because you can smoke them, right? Because there's an intrinsic value of a cigarette. But let's say we're in prison and you want to buy something for me and pay me in cigarettes. Even if I don't smoke, I'll take the cigarettes because I know somebody else does. And even if the other person doesn't smoke, they'll take it because ultimately someone's going to smoke those cigarettes. So you can smoke a cigarette, that's the intrinsic value. There's nothing you can do with Bitcoin. You can't smoke it, you can't do anything with it except give it to somebody else. Gold, I can use my gold as medium of exchange, but I can also melt it down and make jewelry or conduct electricity.
But you can't do that with actual fiat, though, like
that's
paper money.
Fiat currency isn't money either. It's currency. The difference between currency and money, currency is a money substitute. Now you can have legitimate currency that's backed by money, right, which would be gold, or you can have fiat currency that's backed by nothing. And the fiat system is bad. Fiat currency works well for a while, especially as a medium of exchange, unit of account, but it's a lousy long-term store of value. That's why it's not good. Gold is much better. And when you talked about AI, we can take gold and bring it into the future using the technology of the internet or even blockchain. You can tokenize gold, and now ownership of gold can be represented digitally and be transferred from peer-to-peer all around the world quickly, inexpensively, much faster, much cheaper than Bitcoin.
To do that.
But Bitcoin doesn't do it well. It's slow and expensive.
But how would this token with gold do it?
Much faster and much cheaper.
How?
Because it does. You don't have to. You don't have the expensive gas, and Bitcoin doesn't even scale. You can't do it. That's why nobody uses it. They just hold on to it and hope it goes up. Well, look, I'm going to have my own token at some point. You have to trust me. But I'll have a third-party auditor that'll come in and audit it. And hey, yeah, the gold's there. And you can have a real-time audit. You can see, the gold that stands behind your token, and you have it redeemable. If you want your gold, you just take your token and redeem it. I mail you the gold.
You can audit Bitcoin, though. That's what the nodes are for.
Yeah, but you're auditing nothing. When you're auditing gold, you're auditing something. Bitcoin is nothing. It is a worthless string of numbers that has no value other than the hope that if you buy it, somebody else will buy it and pay more.
If you're stuck spending dollars, at least stop earning fiat rewards. Use Fold and earn Bitcoin on everyday spending, groceries, travel, even paying bills. And take advantage of Bitcoin rewards with merchants you might already shop with. It's the easiest way to stack sats. So, if you're in the United States and you don't have Fold yet, what are you doing? Buy, earn, and save in Bitcoin, all in one app. Fold is the ultimate toolkit for making Bitcoin savings a daily habit. Speaking of AI, your son Spencer thinks AI is going to lead us to a deflationary future. Do you agree?
Well, I believe that AI has the potential to vastly increase productivity. And what productivity does is lowers prices. It creates more supply and so a lower price. And I think that is going to happen. Now, government offsets that by creating inflation. Inflation just puts upward pressure on prices. The free market puts downward pressure on prices. But if AI is so productive that it puts more downward pressure than the government puts upward pressure, yes, we'll have falling prices. We had falling prices in America for over 100 years before we invented the Federal Reserve. So that is the natural tendency. But, we may have to go through hyperinflation first, who knows? But yeah, I think that 100 years from now, the real cost of goods and services will be dramatically less than it is today. Capitalism, and we still have some capitalism left, I wish we had more, but it's very dynamic, and it's a force for good and for higher living standards. And it just has to overcome the force for bad that is exerted by government, which is like a huge impediment, roadblock, inhibiting progress. That's why if you look at countries that have the most government, a totalitarian communist government, there's no progress at all. Government has completely blocked it. But to the extent that you can limit the power of government, you can have progress, you can have prosperity.
So I want to touch on what many Bitcoiners say online. Many say that gold failed the test in the digital era because it requires too much trust to transact with.
No, that's just made up, like the gold asteroid that's going to come down and make gold worthless because it's going to be so abundant. But gold has never failed anything. People fail. We were on a gold standard for a long time. It worked great, but the government abandoned it because they didn't want to follow the discipline that gold was imposing. So if you stick on a gold standard, it works beautifully. If you give up on it, if you abandon it, that's not gold's fault. Gold is just a metal. And to say that Bitcoin is going to succeed where gold failed is ridiculous, because governments are no more going to adopt a Bitcoin standard than a gold standard, because the government can't print Bitcoin, right? They'd have to mine it or they have to buy it, just like gold. And they don't want the discipline.
But wouldn't going back to a gold standard be practically impossible?
Well, it would require some fiscal discipline, but all you have to do is repeg the dollar to gold. Now, you couldn't do it at $3,300 an ounce unless you had massive deflation. So you'd have to raise the price of gold much higher, the official devaluation of the dollar. Maybe gold has to be 20,000 an ounce, 30,000, I don't know. But once you fix it, then it's fixed. Then the government has to keep the money supply constant so that it has the gold to back it up at whatever the ratio is. And then they have to cut government spending, or they have to raise taxes so that the Fed doesn't have to print more money, because they can't print more money unless they have more gold.
I do have to admit, your argument confused me. Because,
no, you're starting to see the light. I'm un-orange pilling you.
No, no, you're not, because
I'm gold pilling you.
Because first you're saying that Bitcoin's not going to succeed, and then you want to tokenize gold and then put it into AI. I'm like, my friend, I'm confused.
No, but that could work. Bitcoin can't. Gold can do everything that Bitcoin can't.
Though? Because that's even worse, since you would create your own token. It would be sort of
But the token is just a digital representation of the gold that backs it up. That's real digital gold. Tokenized gold is real digital gold.
But it would Bitcoin have a creator that it would be you. For example, you have Bitcoin that has the Immaculate Conception. We don't know who created it. The man or the woman has disappeared.
Well, maybe it was created with some nefarious purpose. I don't know. Maybe there's some back door in there that none of us know about. I mean, how do you know? Look, do you have health insurance?
Yes.
You're trusting a health insurance company. The whole concept of insurance is trusting a third party to pay your claim.
And the whole point of Bitcoin is you don't trust, you verify.
But the problem with Bitcoin is there's nothing there.
So would you trust me with your gold right now?
But I'd rather trust somebody with my gold than trust, the community not to lose confidence in a worthless asset.
one of the reasons why it kind of didn't work was because the banks, the trusted third parties, were lying about the gold that they hadn't stored.
Well, no, only the government was. Private custodians didn't lie because the free market put pressure on them, to be honest. Once you have a reputation, you want to defend it. Like Brinks, for example, has been in business for about 150 years. They've never lost an ounce of gold that they've stored for other people. Now, I'm sure along the way, maybe they lost some or some was stolen, but they made good because they have a reputation that they don't want to be tarnished, because that brand, that reputation has value in the marketplace. And in a free market, people compete with a brand for confidence and safety. And the same thing would happen with tokenized gold. You'd have all kinds of companies.
The same thing would happen if you admit you're a Bitcoiner. It would destroy your whole brand.
You can say, look, I'm a Bitcoiner at heart, but not at mind.
I love
See,
that.
I'm too
Okay,
smart
that's
to be a Bitcoiner.
No. That is gold. So that leads me to, we're going to play a mini game right now.
Oh, okay.
That you're a Bitcoiner at heart, which I like, because I want you to give me your best and honest, positive pitch for Bitcoin.
Yeah, people will take it seriously. But look, it's the same pitch for gold, because people are substituting Bitcoin for gold. But I say, look, we need an alternative. People need to unbank themselves from this fiat fractional reserve monetary system. And, I think gold is the best alternative, maybe silver at the point because it's cheap. But the same reasons that I tell people to buy gold and silver is the reason that other people buy Bitcoin. But I think there are a lot of people that buy Bitcoin that have no idea what they're doing. They're just buying it because they were told to buy it. Their friend bought it, made money. They think they're going to get rich. There's a lot of just rampant speculation in the space. And again, look at all, look at how the Bitcoin maxis look at everybody else buying the altcoins, and how, all those coins are nothing, they're all worthless, but Bitcoin is great. When in many cases, there's really not much difference between the coins that you guys hate and Bitcoin.
I know. Elaborate. No. What do you mean there's not that big of a difference between?
Because fundamentally, they have a lot more in common than they have different. To say that, all these tokens are worthless, but Bitcoin's not, because, it was first, or, it's the most decentralized, or, whatever
it's like saying the different types of metals. Silver's not the same as gold.
No, it's not. It's not the same. But I think that there are a lot of coins that have a lot more in common with Bitcoin than silver has in common with gold. Yeah, they're both metals, and in some cases you can substitute them.
But what would you do in places like, for example, in Africa, in third world countries, that they don't have the privilege to own gold? What would be, they don't even have bank accounts.
Well, they can buy gold. And you know what they should do if they were going to get into a crypto? They should be buying crypto backed by gold. They should be buying real tokenized gold, and they can use that as a medium of exchange. They can use that as a store of value. It works much better than Bitcoin, and it's certainly much better than a US dollar stable coin, because those work well as medium of exchange, but they're a lousy store of value. The stable coins make a lot of money for the issuers because they use other people's money to buy treasuries, and they get the interest. But then you have a bunch of people who own the stable coin that get no interest and just get killed to inflation, if they hold it.
I'm inviting you to Isla Mujeres so you can see how a Bitcoin circular economy is actually changing people's lives.
Where's that?
In Mexico.
In Mexico.
Cancun.
Well, I might go. I got a boat. I might, if I take it from Puerto Rico to Cancun.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And then we can test out if the gold with the people will be better than the Bitcoin. I don't know how they're going to buy the gold, but no. And the last question I have for you is, what is your hottest take on Bitcoin?
I have the same take I've always had. I call it a Ponzi, a pyramid, a blockchain letter. I haven't changed my position on Bitcoin since I first discovered it. But, I outsmarted myself out of a lot of money. I overthought it back then. Just the potential of other people not getting it, but buying it anyway. Just because the story was interesting enough, but I didn't even imagine that, Wall Street would embrace it the way they did, because they weren't even interested in gold. So why would they be interested in some digital version of it that purported to be gold? But if there was ever a bubble that was built for me, this was it. I mean, this could have been my bubble. This whole thing could have been Peter Schiff. Because if I would have bought Bitcoin, I could have promoted it. And that was one of the reasons I didn't even want to buy it, is because I didn't want to tell other people to buy it, because I knew I would pump up the price, and I felt badly about buying it and then getting other people to. But this was a Peter Schiff bubble. It was right up my alley, because I missed the .com bubble, because I knew that it was going to end badly, so I never got in that. I never got in the housing bubble on the way up, but this bubble was tailor-made for me. I could have really made a killing off the Bitcoin bubble, but I sat it out. And a lot of people have come to me, oh, let's do a Peter Schiff meme coin. There's so many people, and I don't want to mislead people. I don't want to encourage people to throw their money away, even if it enriches me. And so I didn't want to just, do what Donald Trump did and come out with Trump coin and pocket hundreds of millions of dollars and take advantage of people that were buying the coin. And I don't want to make money that way. I want to make an honest living.
I love that, honest living, so no tokenization and...
Well, I'll tokenize gold. That's honest. That's real money. You can't get rich quick with gold. What you can do is avoid going broke.
I do like gold, so I can't argue with that.
Yeah, well, you're wearing it well.
Bueno, thank you so much.